Robert Stroud, AZ number 594, appears on the Bureau of Prisons website as the island's most famous inmate. Known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, Stroud's notoriety derives mostly from Burt Lancaster's portrayal of him in the Hollywood and extremely fictitious adaptation of his life. I showed this movie poster in an earlier video. The Birdman of Alcatraz, Burt Lancaster. I think this was released in the early 1960s, maybe 1962. Stroud was sentenced to 12 years in prison in 1909 after committing his first murder. After 3 years, he was transferred to Leavenworth, where he fatally stabbed a guard in the dining hall in front of his fellow inmates. Despite being known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, Stroud actually conducted his bird studies, mostly canaries, while serving time in isolation at Leavenworth. The prison administration believed initially that his work with birds would be therapeutic for him, but eventually in 1942 he was transferred to Alcatraz Island. Because of the no-frills treatment at Alcatraz, Stroud was never allowed to keep birds in his cell. Stroud lived at Alcatraz in segregation for 17 years. The first 6 years he spent on D Block, but the rest of the time he served in the hospital cell. Again, the hospital was located above the dining hall. In 1959, he was transferred off the island to a medical prison in Springfield, Missouri, where he would die on November 21st, 1963, which was the day before John F. Kennedy's assassination in Dallas, Texas. The fictitious film treatment of Stroud's life treats him like a grandfatherly figure, but the reality is that Stroud was a vicious, psychopathic killer. His personality can best be summed up by a quote by Jolene Babiak, author of a book, Birdman, The Many Faces of Robert Stroud. Babiak, who spent several years living on the island when her father worked there, includes an anecdote in the introduction to this book relating to the Battle of Alcatraz, which was a 1946 escape attempt that I'll cover in a later video. At one point, in an attempt to recapture the cell house after a hostage-taking escape attempt, United States Marines and prison guards dropped grenades through the roof ventilators and fired rifles through the windows of D Block, which housed Stroud. So up here in the far right corner, I think the last cell on the top tier is cell 42, and he would have spent time there, but he was spent a lot of time in the next cell, cell 41. And then you can see from the exterior of the cell block, this, if you can see the concrete wall here, would mark the recreation yard. These are the windows coming from the bay facing D Block. So if you look through those windows, this would be the view. Here are the windows. So according to Babiak, when she inspected the back of the cells in D Block with a National Park ranger, she found sporadic bullet holes in the concrete. Most cells had no bullet damage, but some cells had one or two holes, just kind of sporadically spread there. When she looked in the far corner, up here where cells 41 and 42 are, she found between 20 and 30 bullet holes. The implication, and a theory held by Robert Stroud himself, was that during the attempt to retake the cell house, guards were intentionally targeting Stroud's cell, though he wasn't part of the escape plan. Babiak's quote sums up who Robert Stroud was. She said, quote, "Somehow Stroud had collected more enemies among men who knew him and more admirers among those who didn't than any prisoner I have ever heard about."